Whereas with non-monogamy, I mean, there's some TV shows and occasionally people mention it, but it's not really like out there, and people have a distorted view of what it is.
I personally feel like being open with the kids is a healthy thing that will go a long way toward normalizing it, and also like you being open with it here on the show is also, because obviously anyone from your work or your family could easily watch this episode and learn what your particular romantic style is, let's say.
If you had any kind of alternate lifestyle, essentially, you always kept it secret because that getting out could be a bad thing.
If I had to guess at any one celebrity, and maybe I'm wrong and he's come out with this, but if I had to guess that there's any one celebrity that's in a successful poly relationship, it's Gene Simmons.
Okay, everybody, welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and hey, we'd love it if you'd like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and by all means, leave comments down there. Whatever you want, anything that's relevant to the episode. Leave a comment, keep the conversation going.
Ah, yes, me, Casey Rochford. Music, right, us. End of this. Watch, listen. So what talk about today, Eric?
You suddenly went back in time, I guess, to
when you're trying to learn two languages or one language, like both languages kind of suffer, I think.
Yeah. Kind of blend them all together and then lose it all.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, I mean, we were kind of having a conversation recently, talking about polyamory, non-monogamy, and stuff like that, and we figured it would be a good topic to revisit because we did do an episode quite a while ago. I think it might have been, was it season one or two?
Maybe two.
It was really early on that we covered that particular topic, non-monogamy in general, and maybe we can go back into it because I know you probably have some thoughts and I have more experiences and things like that. So
I think it's one of those topics that like there's probably no end to that conversation because there's so many facets and so many people.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing about non-monogamy in general is that there's not really an official format, basically. Like there people kind of have it in their head of like what it means or something, but it means different things to different people and different groups, like essentially like couples or partners or whatever. Like everybody does their own thing in their own way, and so it's kind of like there's, like you said, this it's never going to end because there's just so much to it,
right? So and the other thing that's different from the last time we talked about this is I'm married now, so there's like that I don't know, locked in kind of on that monogamy track sort of angle to the discussion now, whereas before, like I was of course still like monogamous minded, but I was trying to be like maybe someday I could think about trying it or whatever, but it's never really been something that I was like so sure about anyway. As I mentioned before in that episode, I've done like swinging, but like not really much. Not even like full on, without getting into too many details and get demonetized in the first 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, and swinging is certainly like I guess a style
It's on the
of non-monogamy.
spectrum.
Yeah, it's kind of a like a lesser as far as being like impactful or something like that. It's more casual, I guess you could say.
Casual, more about fun and less
Yeah,
about,
yeah, and usually there's a strict set of rules that people kind of craft for that, so it's like very safe in terms of like relationship risk, I guess you could say.
Yeah, actually about swinging and how that is kind of part of that community, because there is a lot of crossover and blending there. I noticed a lot of people in that lifestyle, as they like to call it, are very much like trying to keep it separate from their work peeps and their children. Now, to each their own, but I kind of wonder, like, why hide that, especially in a day and age where it's like totally acceptable to be trans, to be homosexual, like all these other facets of sexuality. Yet what you do between a man and a woman right here is like, which is traditionally everything's, tickety boo, right? And they're hiding all that.
Well, I think it's still that non-monogamy is still one of those things that hasn't really been widely accepted. And so
do you see that in the poly world too? Like people hiding it from family, or
yeah, it does exist because it's like people have been exposed very much to like homosexuality, right? Like it's kind of more or less mainstream. Nobody really cares anymore. Like it's not a big deal. Maybe personally with your own family directly, right? It's like coming out to your family can be a struggle. But as far as like being accepted by the wider cultural world, it's really not a thing. And being trans, it's still, we're sort of like dealing with that, at least in the US it's still kind of a thing, but it's a lot more accepted and understood. People kind of just let it go, and it's not that big of a deal. But the non-monogamy is still something that people can't wrap their heads around, and might still be pretty judgmental. And there's more to it that makes it maybe a lot more difficult to deal with. Like, it's, I don't know. I think it's one of those things that hasn't been understood by the average person, and hasn't really become accepted in a mainstream way. So I think people, and also maybe internally, we're still dealing with the effects from the past, where it was like, if you had any kind of alternate lifestyle, essentially, you always kept it secret because that getting out could be a bad thing.
Right. Let's parse that out a little bit, because I do kind of wonder, not that I think there's any problem with choosing to have your family dynamic be more than the nuclear family style, right? But given like what you said about how people are, used to something more traditional and might be a little judgmental about that, and especially in regards to raising children, what has been, and share as much as you feel comfortable sharing on behalf of other people, since you yourself don't have kids that you know of. What are people generally like with their own kids, in so much as like sharing that part of their life?
Well, again, it goes back to, it's sort of personal. Each individual kind of has their own set of rules or what they want to, how far they want to go, essentially.
Mhm.
Some people, they just, you know other partners will come by and they'll say, oh, my friend, or uncle so and so, if they're more of a staple in the relationship.
Uh-huh.
They become part of the family, but kind of a secondary part. And some people are just straight out open, like, yep, here I've got two partners, that kind of
Uh-huh.
thing.
So, I mean, the nuclear family, in a biological sense at least, really doesn't change. And
No, generally not.
even
uh,
it isn't even like, oh, I've got two dads and one mom or anything like that. It's really like, oh, this a friend or an uncle or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Um,
yeah.
like, and I honestly, I think kids can wrap their heads around that just fine. And yeah, they might get teased at school, but they're gonna get teased for something.
Well,
Like
if they
that's
if they communicate that to the other their fellow students, sure, that could happen.
yeah.
And that's where I think the people deciding to say, like, use a different term rather than like boyfriend or girlfriend or partner or something. That and it does also depend for kids. It kind of depends on how established things have been prior to that. Like if you have been non-monogamous from the beginning, and the kids are raised just understanding that, then it's not a big deal. Whereas I think if you have had, let's say your kids are like, like in middle school or something, and you kind of your relationship, you kind of open it up and start exploring. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a shock, I guess, or it'll be a little bit more difficult for kids to deal with, to kind of adjust to that change. So that kind of depends.
Yeah. I I I I personally feel like being open with the kids is a healthy thing that will go a long way toward normalizing it. Um, and also like you being open with it here on the show is also, because obviously anyone from your work or your family could easily watch this episode and learn what your particular romantic style is, let's say.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that, yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you shouldn't feel ashamed of it at all, and nobody else should
No.
either. But yeah, I see what you mean. How like with being gay or being trans, those things are uh, people have already laid the groundwork for taking that first step to be the brave ones that come out and say so.
Well, yeah, and it's widely discussed. That's the thing.
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot of discussion about that. Whereas with non-monogamy, I mean, there's some TV shows and occasionally people mention it, but it's not really like out there, and people have the distorted view of what it is. Like people on the outside, essentially, they don't really understand. And that, like, the TV shows that you see kind of give a weird um picture, I guess. And that's all that people know. Like it's not like talked about on the news or uh talk shows or whatever. I mean, if it is, it's very brief. um and well, for me too, like, I don't mind talking about myself, being non-monogamous, because everybody that knows me knows that I am, that, like, people at work, I'm completely open with it. You know, people ask questions or they make assumptions, but
yeah.
I don't hide it.
It's funny that you don't see like celebrities touting this at all. You know it must exist in that realm, but
mm,
well, if I had to guess at any one celebrity, and maybe I'm wrong and he's come out with this, but if I had to guess that there's any one celebrity that's in a successful poly relationship, it's Gene Simmons, because this guy brazenly tells all these stories about having sex with women, even though he's been with Shannon Tweed, I think her name is. This one lady, like effectively like they're not married, but it's been so long that it's like common law or whatever. Forever. Like they've been together forever. And he still talks about like screwing other women, and they're still together, you know? So it's like, obviously, either she knows he's just lying and trying to make himself look good, like peacocking, or he actually does this and she's totally okay with it. But why not? Exactly. Why not just take it a step further and be like, chill out, people, we're poly, you know, like.
Yeah, well, and it may be, if it's just a sex thing, it could be kind of more like swinging. That's like, poly is a little bit different, and there is sort of a spectrum of and there's a lot of different names for things, you know. But
say he goes out on a date with these girls every time he's in town, like, doesn't that then blend into some form of a relationship?
Sure, yeah, and that could be more than, you know, it could be more than just sex if you go and do other things. You know, poly tends to, like, when I think of polyamory, I think of like there being some sort of interaction, right? Like it's not necessarily separate. Maybe people they communicate, partners communicate with each other, or they've met everybody, that kind of thing. It's not like, oh, you know, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. Like, go ahead and do what you want. I'm not going to worry about it. That's, you know, like it can get even deeper too. Like you have what's called kitchen table polyamory, where everybody's sort of like, it's sort of a family essentially. Like,
I see what you did
there. Yeah. Right next to the kitchen sink. Yeah. And that form involves more like people getting together and hanging out, like, you know, having barbecues, game days, like maybe even like cohabitating with multiple partners, that kind of thing. So it does vary, and there's like polycules, essentially like closed off but multiple partners. So maybe there's like 3 people, but they don't really explore beyond that, but there's more than just 2 people. It does vary, and it is sort of like something that is personally crafted, I think.
Yeah,
but you're right, there isn't a lot of mainstream, like, you don't, like, I mean, you see celebrities and politicians and stuff who are like trans or gay or something, and people see that all over the place, but I don't know of any that are poly, like that talk about it, at least. Like, it isn't, I don't know,
so there is like a reality show with like a Mormon guy and a bunch of wives or something, but I kind of count that differently, because that's strictly polyandry, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't go both ways, where they can have other husbands or whatever. I think they aren't even cool with like woman on woman or anything like that. So, and it's all hiding behind the veil of this is all okay because my religion says so. It's not even about like, hey, this is just how I want to live my life. It's more like, God says I can, so I should.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things, is the balance there, that it's like, if it should be equitable, right? If say the guy can have multiple girlfriends or whatever, well, then those girlfriends ought to be able to have multiple boyfriends. Otherwise, it's not really like, it's not balanced.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right. That is a little bit different, and because generally speaking, in the poly world, like there are no like, oh, only, you know, it's not really, I wouldn't consider it to be poly if it's like, oh, only one person can have other partners but not my partner, right? Like, they can't, I can go do whatever I want, but they got to stay at home and not see anybody else. That's not fair.
it up front, you never have sex.
No, but that's the thing. It's like that's just a normal component of a relationship. Like monogamous relationships. Have you ever been in a monogamous relationship where you didn't have sex with a partner, but you were together? Like, would you get married to somebody and not ever have sex with them?
You do remember my first marriage, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, it's like, while love is infinite, time is not. Like, you only have so much time. And obviously, you got to take time for yourself, too. And that typically, as long as that's sort of put out there from the beginning, it typically isn't a problem.